I'm going to go back a couple of years now to 2008. At that time in my life, I was a bit of a gypsy. I called myself a traveler. I was 26 years old, and I had already been to about 50 countries around the world, most of them far-flung places off the beaten track. And it was the people's lives, their stories and cultures that I learned about, which motivated me to keep going and which eventually inspired me to pursue a brief career in journalism. And what I discovered through my travels is that the world is not usually the place that we see on TV. People everywhere generally have the same values and they want the same things in life. On my second day in Somalia, I visited a World Food Program feeding center, which is a place where about 8,000 women and children receive emergency food aid every day. I was amazed to see how kind and how generous the Somali women are, even in the face of extreme hunger. A very thin young woman, maybe 20 years old, approached me holding an emaciated baby on her hip. And she shyly asked me if I was hungry and if I wanted to share with her some of the food that she had just received. And that watery porridge that she had in her plastic pail was all the food that she would have for the next 2 days' time, when her and her baby would again risk their lives, walking through a war zone to stand in line for hours in the blazing sun to receive that tiny bit of food. You just never forget a moment like that. On the morning of August 23rd, 2008, my third day in the country, Nigel and I, along with 3 security guards we had hired, our translator, driver, and cameraman, we all piled into an SUV and we set out to film a massive internally displaced people's camp just outside of the capital city, Mogadishu. This was the camp that I had come to report on. It was a sprawling place home to about 250,000 people. And I had read that people in the camp were starving to death, that there wasn't enough money being donated internationally to feed the people. I felt like I needed to see it for myself, and I had really been dreaming of sitting with these people and asking them what I could do to help. As we approached the camp, we rounded a bend in the road, and as we turned, I could see a car pulled over up ahead of us. And like in a movie, a dozen armed men emerged from where they had been hiding behind the vehicle, their AK-47s fixed on ours. Their faces were completely wrapped in checkered scarves, showing only their eyes, but even so, I could tell that they were very young. We were ordered out of our vehicle and then made to lie face down on the dirt with their guns fixed at the back of our heads. After what felt like hours, they pulled us back up, put us back in the vehicle, and drove off, and now one of our kidnappers was at the wheel. We drove for probably an hour through the desert, passing herds of camels and dusty villages, and even the internally displaced people's camp that I had been trying to get to. There was a gun held to the back of my head the entire time, but at a certain point I dared to turn around and I saw the person holding it. I was so shocked when my eyes met the wide and panicked stare of Ismail, who I later found out was only 14 years old. 160 days as a hostage, Nigel and I were finally released following a ransom payment that financially devastated our families. And in those first very confusing hours after my release, a CTV reporter asked me if I felt any sympathy towards my captors. And I responded without any hesitation at all, saying, no, none whatsoever. And for a few weeks, I allowed myself the luxury of feeling sorry for myself, something that had been too painful for me to do while I was still in captivity. Like all the things that I couldn't do when I was a hostage, exploring my emotions without the threat of death over my head was a newfound freedom. So I tried anger on for size. And then I realized that I had the greatest opportunity for personal transformation to occur now because I really had a choice. To put the truths that I had learned about forgiveness and compassion to work in my life, or to just slide into the bitter and depressed state that everybody expected me to be in. I chose to put my vision into action. 4 months after I returned home, I established the Global Enrichment Foundation because I strongly believe that the people of Somalia will lead their country out of its current state of chaos if they're given opportunities to educate themselves and take leadership roles in their community, especially the women.